Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th episode of A QISSAA with Ishika, quintessential and inspiring stories of South Asian artists, funded by the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellow Grant. My name is Ishika Muchal, and I am coming to you from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, also known as Los Angeles, California. I am beyond thrilled to introduce to you my guest today, Shaan Sharma, a man of many talents within the entertainment industry. Shaan has worked as a commercial and theatrical SAG-AFTRA actor with over 40 TV and 30 commercial credits, currently playing Shmuel on The Chosen. A Backstage Expert Contributor, he served as a casting session director for 45 LA casting directors over the last 10 years. He has served SAG-AFTRA as the LA Local Board of Directors member, a National Board replacement, LA Member Education and Conservatory Instructor, LA Conservatory Committee Co-Chair, Chair of the Conservatory Subcommittee on Curriculum and Faculty, and Head of Commercial and Theatrical Departments. He is the author of the acclaimed book, Commercial Acting in LA, A Session Director's Guide. Shaan has founded his own acting studio called the Storytellers Conservatory and serves as a USC School of Dramatic Arts guest lecturer, as well as an adjunct professor for Pace University in New York School of Drama. I am so honored to welcome Shaan Sharma.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining me on A QISSAA with Ishika.
Yeah, of course, man. That all sounded really impressive.
I mean, yeah, you are pretty impressive.
I guess if you trade enough of your life for experience, stuff like that happens.
Yeah. The dream is to one day have a resume that sounds that good.
Oh, that's cool. I'm still in process, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning. I was reading that you were first drawn to the arts realm through music and specifically rock, and you had your own band. So what drew you into that love for music, and then what made you transition into your love for acting?
Well, first of all, I showed signs as a young kid that I was very, creatively inclined, both from drawing and singing and dancing and playing in front of our home camcorder, making stupid videos and stuff, and then playing with keyboards and music and all of that. I was always playing an instrument of one kind or another until I got to junior high, when I started singing, and then I became kind of a well-known singer within our community, and started singing with the high school choir even as a 9th grader, which was really cool. And then I had to go to summer school to pass the 9th grade, and I met the director of the high school musicals, who became a real mentor to me. So that's basically what got me into acting, was just as his invitation to participate. And it turned out I had a knack for it. It was a fun escape from kind of the tumultuous childhood that I had. And then from not wanting to be at home, I spent a lot of extra time at school, and I would just play around on the practice pianos and so I taught myself how to play piano, which got noticed, and I got invited to be the keyboardist for a band with some of the cool kids in school, and that made me cool. And so, yeah, music became something I pursued as a primary for about 10 years. And then acting was secondary in the Minneapolis, Twin Cities, market. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2007, and it switched, where music is now something I do for pretty much my own self-expression, and acting has been my main focus since about 2007.
Okay. Yeah. So what inspired that specific shift where you decided to pursue it as a career?
Well, in Minnesota, I had carved a really nice little niche for myself, but I wanted to pursue acting in projects that weren't really coming to Minnesota very frequently. So,
Right.
High-end studio features and network television and that kind of thing. So if I wanted to do that kind of work, I kind of needed to go to where the work was. And so that's why I relocated out here. So even though I may have wanted acting to be a bigger part of my life in Minnesota, there really wasn't the training infrastructure for me to really learn how to do it well,
Right.
for on camera. And then also, there wasn't the kind of frequency of jobs there for me to be able to do it at the highest level like I wanted to. So yeah, coming here made that all possible, because then I had access to the kind of training and the opportunity that I didn't have back in Minnesota.
Absolutely. And growing up in Minnesota, both as just a South Asian and as an artist, have you ever felt the need to fit in? Or when you talk about like finding roles beyond what you were finding in Minnesota, was that more of like a representation thing or just like the type of roles that you were looking for?
Well, the world has changed a lot since, 1998 when I graduated high school.
Mhm.
And then I went right into being a musician and an actor in the Twin Cities. And so, yeah, I mean, try watching an episode of Friends, even this day. Not all of it holds up very well, right? Like the times have changed. And so, when I was getting into acting in the Twin Cities, people would use me as kind of like a dash of color just to be more inclusive. And I remember I represented Mexico in a project, and I'm not Mexican, but they just were trying to take one of the few guys of color that were even in the market and
Yeah.
just like get a little Sean in there to make it look more diverse. And so, it was a real kind of like opportunity for me. I think I booked a lot of projects just because they wanted somebody of color to be in the project that wasn't just Black or Hispanic. And so I kind of became a catch-all kind of ethnically ambiguous way.
Like a
Um,
token.
yeah, yeah. Or, but, it's also kind of like, I appreciate the fact that, there weren't that many. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, like, obviously you're going to Cal Arts, and so you've either made the decision or your parents got behind the decision or whatever. But my parents were not supportive of me going into the arts at all when I was growing up. And so, it's there weren't that many of, let's just say, my generation that
Right.
were encouraged to go into the arts by their parents. And
Mhm.
so there weren't many options. So I appreciate that they wanted to include me, because that it was cool that they because I've worked for a decade in commercial casting, and it's very easy just to focus on Black, Hispanic, and white as like the
Right.
main represented groups. South Asian was very low on the list of who they wanted to include,
Yeah.
and it's not like they have a ton of options. Much more today than 20 years ago, for sure. But what's interesting about that question is I kind of had a real kind of revelation about that topic earlier this year that's changed the way that I educate about this. But there was no way for me to hide when I was growing up because I was the only
Mhm.
Indian kid in an all-white school.
Mhm.
So, in terms of like, but I never felt, and I think this is a credit to where I grew up, I never felt overt racism until after like like, but I mean, after elementary school and people are just mean and experimenting with, bullying and all that,
Mhm.
I never really felt like my race was any kind of issue in my ability to move forward and accomplish things. If anything, I
Mhm.
felt like it distinguished me in a unique way because I
Yeah.
was I was rare, I was exotic, I was this other thing.
Right.
So for me, thankfully, my journey was really a pleasant one, although it wasn't comfortable when I was going through, grade school to be so different than everybody else.
Mhm.
That's for sure. But and I did feel like I needed to kind of work even harder to distinguish myself so that people could get over the fact that I look different.
Right.
But doing all the artistic stuff that I was doing, I felt embraced. I really felt embraced by the community.
Mhm. And you talk about how South Asians, of course, don't often go into this career field, and especially back then, but you've always been a big advocate for people going into acting, even if they are South Asian. So why that? If
Well, I was the black sheep of the Indian community in the Twin Cities because I was the one at Hindu camp telling everybody to follow their dreams instead of being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. And so all those Indian parents would be like, "Don't talk to Sean. He's putting dangerous ideas in your head." So if anything, I I was more of a target by the Indian community than I was anybody else for promoting for people to follow their dreams. But it's not like we can blame them. Like they wanted everybody to have security and a better life, and a lot of like I'm first generation. My parents moved here because they wanted me to have a
yeah,
better life than they did, and sending me into the arts was not like a something that they saw as a very secure way to do that.
right.
But like for me, arts was the way that I survived. It was if I did because of the Indian culture was not healthy in my home. My mom and my dad were an arranged marriage. My mom met my dad 3 days before they were married. She already knew something was off about him. She did not want to marry him, but her family basically told her it's too late. So she ended up in an abusive marriage for 5 years before I came along, and they divorced 18 years too late, and so it was not a positive part of our family. My father was a very like dominating patriarchal kind of like figure, and so I rejected like Indian culture as much as I could when I was like in junior high and high school, because it had caused so much damage in our own family. And so yeah, having music and art and friends and acting gave me a way to escape from all of that craziness. And so it saved my life. Of course, I'm going to encourage other people to express themselves and, get a reprieve from all of that. But even though I encourage other people to, it's not like as a kid I made much of an impact in that area. But it's always been important for me to be a voice for, doing what you love as opposed to doing what other people want you to do.
Yeah, no, I think even hearing that one voice telling you to like validating your dreams is so important, because like you said, not everyone, South Asian or not, has that support when going into the arts. So just hearing even one or two voices that support you means a lot in my
Well,
personal
what I think is cool is like now is the right time for me to be spreading that message.
right.
Because when I was a kid, is Shaan going to actually be successful at what it is that he's being so bold and telling everybody to do? But
Yeah.
like now I can look back and say, yeah, I've been a working actor for 10 years. Like I make my living as a performer. I can decide what I want to do with my life and my days, because I could sit on a beach all day and then just go shoot my show for 4 months out of the year. But like, I'm so involved in my community and I love it, and I'm educating and I'm writing and I'm volunteering for my union as well as acting and auditioning and all this stuff. So I'm living my dream, and my nobody could have known that would be how it would turn out for this crazy kid back when I was so young. But when I look at someone like you, I'm like, dude, you can totally do this. Like you can totally do this. Like in fact, the environment is such that you have a much more inclusive, and culturally sensitive environment in which to proceed, and actually even a better environment, I would say, for women to get involved, because there's been so much awareness within especially the union leadership community of how many fewer roles there are for women over 40, for example, than there are for men.
Right.
And there's been a big movement to try to make sure that women directors are more included, women crew positions are more included. So we're seeing a lot of positive change that should make it a much more welcoming industry for you than it was even for me. And I didn't even feel that discriminated against. It's just, like I was able to kind of eke my way through, but I'm excited for you.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we're finally reaching a point where the roles are just barely reaching the proportionate amount of representation as they are to the population.
Mm-hmm.
So still not there, but almost. So that's a good sign. Yeah. Yeah, but even now, especially looking at your career, your trajectory from working with casting to your classes to being picked up by Backstage and SAG and all of your work, what was some of the most influential part of your journey thus far? And like, what was your most favorite part, I guess?
Well, it's so strange how I ended up with this unique collection of experience, because a lot of people become working actors,
Mhm.
but they don't have the experience behind the camera on the casting side to see
Right.
how that all works. And then even if you have those, very few people have the opportunity to be published writers about that stuff. And the great thing about writing is it really helps you think things through and
Mhm.
figure out how to communicate about it. And it's kind of like having a dialogue with yourself where you can try to like become more articulate or even develop your own understanding of things even better. And then being an educator really tests that, because then you're having to communicate that information to other people and in such a way that they get it. And not everybody who works at a high level is good at teaching others how to do it at a high level.
Right.
Those are very different skills. And then being a union leader, it's like very, very few people get to be in the halls of, say, leadership of the union to get the kind of access to the information that I have. And so, it's kind of bizarre. I didn't seek any of it out. It all kind of found me. And I think that it found me because my kind of guiding principle, since I was even a kid, even in high school, has been to add value to other people. It's like, it's so easy for us to focus on ourselves, but who can say no to someone wanting to add value? And so I've throughout my life, I have gotten involved in casting. I got involved in teaching, all these things just by being of value to other people and offering my services up. So I've made countless hours of an investment of working for free, supporting this person, doing that, helping them do this, that. And like, it's all generated relationships that changed the course of my life. And so what I tell other people is that, networking isn't just going to, events and getting business cards and saying, hey, will you help me get a job? Networking is like, how can you become an indispensable part of other people's creative processes and lives that will help you in some way in terms of what I'm going to learn, or that relationship, if I really demonstrate my value to this person, then it will open up doors for me in my career. So I've just been such a, listen, I'm not just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. Like, I am doing more things than just about anybody I know to try to, accelerate my career in this industry. When I'm not auditioning, I'm developing material and I'm creating content. And when I'm not doing that, I'm actually volunteering in the union, where I'm not just being a part of like board meetings. I'm a part of committee meetings about all kinds of different topics, from new technology to communications to education to outreach. And then when I'm doing grassroots things where I'm building relationships across the country with other union leaders as well. And then I'm also teaching, and then I'm also like acting, and I'm building that experience across the country on sets. And it's like, I'm doing so many things that are directly in our industry. It's like, it would be unfair if I wasn't successful. Like, if you do all of this stuff, you should win. Like, you should. And I'm happy to report, just spend 20 years, you guys, and you'll win. Like, it could happen sooner for you than it did for me, because I was distracted by some things that happened in life, and also because I started a technology company a while ago, and that took some of my attention. And one of the things I also haven't done is I haven't been willing to sacrifice my health and quality of life as well. So like, even though I worked my butt off, I always took time to treat myself, take time for myself. Some people never give themselves a break and give themselves that win. So yeah, I think that's kind of a sloppy way of answering your question, of saying, like, it all happened because I was willing to make sacrifices to invest in my future over the long term. It was like, kind of like, how compound interest works. If I just invest a little bit every day for, 20 years, eventually I'll be rich. And that's kind of the investment I've made in relationships and in, opportunities. But I'm also, I'm in my 40s now, and I don't have a wife and a kid. And that's because I've been so focused on developing my career that some of these other personal goals that I thought I would have by this point just haven't happened. But the good news is now I can actually support a wife and a kid. So, that's why some people, they spend their 20s and 30s so that they can be more stable in their 40s and 50s and beyond. And that's the track that my life's taken.
Yeah. I loved what you said about investing in relationships with people, almost like building mutually beneficial relationships. So it's not just you relying on someone to like give you something without you actually not necessarily helping them, but providing some active service to them as well.
There has to be a karmic balance, right? Like, if you're not using someone, you're actually delivering value to them. And then when somebody sees that you've delivered value to them, they have a natural inclination to want to return the favor. And that has been so beneficial for me in my life, is to, in some ways, like, not ingratiate myself to people, but like, like being awesome to them and supporting them in awesome ways that other people wouldn't. And then they're like, well, what can I do to help you? And I'm like, well, so absolutely, you have to. I mean, the investments we make in each other are the most important, investments we can make, because ultimately, none of us do any of this alone. It is not and that's one of the things that I really try to educate around, is why are people going at this by themselves? It's such a collaborative art form. You need each other. It's not optional. I mean, if you were going to go out and do a one-woman show on stage, you could do it alone. But if you're trying to make a on-camera project of any kind, you can't do that alone.
Yeah.
So we need each other, and we need to act like that all the time, not just when we're on a show together, but all the time.
Yeah. And that's a big part of the union. I'm assuming the work you do on the union is like that cross-pollination, cross-collaboration.
Oh my God, I can talk to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm on set, I can talk to the crew because I know that they're part of specific IATSE locals. I can talk to, the casting directors because they're Teamsters. I can talk to the producers because many of them are under the PGA or the producers union. I can talk to, the directors because they're DGA. I can talk to the writers because they're WGA. I can talk to the casting directors on the commercial side because they're CCDA. And I can talk to every one of our 13 professions under our own union, from puppeteers and pilots to singers, dancers, stunt performers, actors, voiceover actors, background performers. Like I could talk to everybody, like because I'm in those streams of conversation, and so like I feel so empowered. I feel so like, and it's not just my own union. Notice I mentioned every other union before I mentioned my own. Like I know where everybody fits into the puzzle. I know how important they all are to this process. So when I step on set, I'm dealing with an entire family of brothers, sisters, and siblings in this entertainment union kind of labor movement.
Right.
And so, being part of the union has when people say, what would you have done differently if you could have when I got out here in 2007, I joined the union right away, but I didn't start volunteering until 2015 when I got plucked out and invited to some meetings. The kinds of progress I could have made in my career, as well as the impact I could have made on the health of our community, had I gotten involved 8 years earlier than I did, oh my God. Like if there's anything I would do over, it would be getting more involved in my union when I first joined.
And speaking of that, can you describe what your specific roles have been on the union? And for those who might be unfamiliar with SAG-AFTRA, just what the role of that union is for actors?
I mean, basically the simplest way to understand what a union is that, corporations are under a legal fiduciary responsibility to maximize profits for their shareholders. And so if they had their way, we would all be working for free and they'd be making 100% profit off of our labor. So the only countervailing force is either your own negotiating power, standing up for yourself, but very few individuals have the kind of negotiating power to change a corporation's, intentions. But if enough people band together and say, we won't work unless you give us equal, or like your fair pay and working conditions and whatever, that's the only force that can balance that out. Now, if the union is not successful in that mission, then they're not getting paid enough and they're being taken advantage of. If the union is too successful, it can actually make the business unprofitable for the company. And so there's always this tension between where's that line between what's a fair distribution of, profits and all that for the benefit of labor versus the employer. And so if you are not part of the union, you're on your own. You're basically on your own. Whatever you can negotiate for yourself, whatever your agent can negotiate for you, that's basically what you're going to get. You don't really have a lot of power to fight back for anything. You're just kind of taking what's out there. If you're part of the union, you got 170,000 of the top performers on the planet across 13 professions who've all decided we're in this together, and you mess with one, you mess with all of us. And so it's so empowering, and we have these member-led processes to negotiate these contracts with major studios, and we can make them treat us better. We can make them pay us better. And that's so cool, like, and when I got involved initially, it was just to teach in their LA local conservatory, just teaching a commercial audition class. But pretty soon I was put on the committee that oversees the entire conservatory for LA. So now I'm developing educational programming for 3,000 conservatory members. And then it expanded to oversee member education for the entire local. So I was bringing in people to talk that was open to all 80,000 members. And then I got added to the board of directors. And so now I'm helping make decisions on what affects our entire LA, jurisdiction, which is, now 85,000 members across all kinds of issues. And then serving in the national boardroom, now I'm responsible for weighing in on things that affect the entire 170,000 membership of the union and all the issues that come with that. And so it's like every year I get deeper and deeper into understanding how the union works, how all of our locals work, our contracts, our the governance of our union, the personalities, our sister companies and support organizations, the benefits of membership, you name it. And I've personally made tens of thousands of additional dollars I would never have made just by knowing my rights and what my contract says, that other performers just leave on the table because they don't know any better, or they're just too afraid to speak up and ask for it, So it's been so cool. I've learned so much, and the union has been, not only has it been, I mean, by the way, it's all volunteer work. Nothing you do for the union is paid. It's all volunteer work. But what you get out of it in terms of like empowerment, but also friends and connections, like my entire network has transformed as a result of participating in the union. And I have friends in leadership of all the other unions. Some of my friends now are people I used to watch on TV growing up. Like one of my closest friends now is a guy named Sean Astin, who some people might know from being Samwise on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And like growing up, he was Mikey in the Goonies, and he was Rudy, and he was in Memphis Belle, and all. It's like I'm watching this kid as a kid, not knowing one day he's going to be like a brother to me, and it all happened because of volunteering for the union that we both love, and that his mom used to be the president of. His mom, Patty Duke, was president of the union back in the 80s, and so many people like that I never would have met if it wasn't for me being involved in my union. In fact, like I could be on set working with somebody, and I still don't have the opportunity to build the kind of relationship with them that I've been able to build through union service. Because when you're on set, you don't want to bother somebody when they're preparing. You can't go in their trailer and just strike up a conversation with them uninvited. But like from all of these union like meetings and on the board and all these movements and stuff, it's like we get to spend quality time and quality relationships with each other. It's been absolutely transformative. So if it seems like I'm gushing about the union, it's because it's been that transformative in my own life. And that's why I devote, 20, 30, 40 hours a week as a volunteer. And I have since 2016,
Yeah.
I'm getting so much out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a perfect example of what you were talking about with that investment of service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a lot of what I have read about your work, in unions and even before with the Fresh Face Showcase is about protecting artists from scams. So can you dig deeper into what some of those scams are that you've experienced or read about, and how you've helped and how other people can avoid those scams?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, for actors, I have a friend and mentor, Kevin McCorkle, who said, we love what we do so much we would do it for free. And it's actually worse than that. We love what we do so much we would pay to do it. I mean, I saw an interview with Jonah Hill where he said, they asked him, like, how badly did you want to work with Martin Scorsese in Wolf of Wall Street? He's like, I would have sold my house and all of my belongings to work on a movie with him. And oftentimes when I'm talking to groups of, aspiring actors, I'll say, who's your favorite actor? Okay, Meryl Streep. How much would you pay to be in a movie opposite Meryl Streep? And they'll say, take my whole bank account. Like, that's how exploitable we are. And so when you're growing up, say in Minnesota, and you go to the mall and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, we think your kid could be a star. Just give us $5,000, $10,000. The kid goes crazy. Like, mom, believe in me. Dad, believe in me. Why won't you pay for this? Blah, blah, blah. The parents don't know any better, so they just want to make their kid happy. And hey, maybe my kid will be a star. And so they're so open for exploitation by bad actors. So, when I was growing up, there were a handful of these places like John Casablancas, John Robert Powers, Barbizon. There was another one called Karen International. And they would all just prey upon parents and kids who didn't know any better, selling them crap photography, crap classes, taking advantage of their dreams just to get them to spend thousands of dollars. And then, they just leave them behind, and they're not any closer to pursuing their dreams, or they never had a real chance at it anyway. They were just kind of exploited for their money. And so I started educating people in Minneapolis about these types of organizations through the Fresh Face Showcase when I was 23 years old. And, over 4 years, we did these huge community fashion events where we got the press involved and the local colleges and designers and all this stuff. And we ended up making a huge impact on driving that kind of predatory behavior down in the state of Minnesota. Then, of course, I left to come to LA in 2007, and I don't know what's happened since I left. But it's so important to protect people from that kind of stuff. You know, one of the things that I educate about is that in the acting community, there is an information problem as well as an execution problem. Like if we think about, you know, physical fitness, right? There's not really an information problem. Everyone knows if you want to get in better shape, it's eating healthy and working out. Like there's no debate about it. Everybody knows it. So it's not an information problem, it's an execution problem. People know what they should do, they just can't do it or they don't do it. But in our community, people don't know what to do and they struggle with doing it. So what I've really tried to do is to solve the information side of that problem is like, what is the formula for success? Now, even if you give someone the formula for success, doesn't mean that everybody's going to do it. Most people aren't. I mean, there's something called the Pareto principle where, you know, 20% of any community does 80% of the productive work. So it doesn't matter, like you could talk to 100 people and only 20 of them will actually follow through and do the things that need to be done. But it's so important to get that information into people's hands and let the chips fall where they may. And so I just have a real problem. And I think it comes from like the household that I grew up in, where I always felt like I was treated unfairly and like, you know, that I'm like, I don't like it when people are taken advantage of. And so it's like a real trigger for me where if I see people are exploited, well, how do I fight back? And so I did that in high school. I did that in Twin Cities. And then I've been doing that in the union when I saw kind of things happening within our union that were not right. And so I've been waging that campaign for, you know, years, 5 years.
Right. I think a big part of it is just actors or anyone in the performing arts industry just not knowing what to beware of. And it's so important that you're doing the work of putting that, like you said, information out there so that we're aware of what to be aware of.
Yeah, not having a frame of reference is so dangerous.
Right.
You know, when I was growing up, I didn't know that the home I was growing up in was any different than anybody else's home. I didn't know that what was happening was abuse. Like I thought it was just, oh, this is just how you're disciplined when you're growing up. Like that's just how things are. Like if all you know are these scams, how do you know that it's any different?
Exactly.
You know? And so it's really important for those of us who have high quality information to get out there and make sure people know about it so that they aren't so susceptible to whatever happens to be around them. I mean, it's so random where we end up, you know. And one of the things that I'm like, you know, looking forward to tackling too is just like these acting studios and these college professors and whatever that teach acting in such an unhealthy way, where it's like teaching you to the test as opposed to developing your own creative voice, or humiliating you or ripping your heart open just to make the scene better in their opinion, even though it could cause lasting, you know, trauma and, you know, mental health issues or emotional health issues for somebody, or outdated techniques or whatever. It's like there's so many culty, strange, you know, educational environments out there that are not doing people a service. And then they come to people like me and I have to do some repair work of like, who messed up your wiring, man? Like we've got to get in there and like make this joyful again, because that's brutal, you know? So yeah, people don't know any better. They think that that's, you know, and actors are always so quick to blame themselves for not being more successful than to actually hold those accountable for what they've done. So it's not that the industry was messed up. It's that I just wasn't good enough to book the many auditions that I had. It's so easy to blame yourself instead of actually hold, you know, people accountable.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons that you started your own acting studio, the Storytellers Conservatory?
That happened just so organically. I mean, I was from working in casting, I started getting invited to go teach kind of session director, you know, point of view,
Right.
you know, commercial audition technique classes at some of these casting director workshop places. And from doing these workshops on a regular basis, I ended up developing a wonderful pool of students that had taken my commercial workshop. And then some of them had reached out to me and were like, hey, would you teach me theatrically? And that really took off when I started working a lot as a theatrical performer around 2012, 2013, when I started shooting like a show every month or something. It's like things were really rocking and rolling. And my friends were like, you know, hey, will you teach me how you're booking all these shows? And I said, all right. So I just started having people in my apartment right that way behind that wall. On Sunday nights, we just get together and I just do stuff. And over the last 10 years, it's grown into the Storytellers Conservatory. I've got 2 partners, John and Charles, who also teach. We've got a wonderful community of students. And so yeah, it was just a natural kind of progression from me being invited to share what I knew with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about your experience as a casting sessions director?
Well, so when I was in Minnesota, this is the broken road. That's how things happen. So when I was 18, I got scammed by a place called John Casablancas in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I spent $5,000 that I shouldn't have spent to go to New York, which I never should have gone. And the 20 of us who went were treated so poorly and were so disappointed with everything. We came back just completely upset. And that led to me starting the Fresh Face Showcase years later to put them out of business, which we did in like 2006. But like exactly, like karma's a bitch. But when one of the guys who I went on that trip with ended up becoming a sushi chef, and so I saw him at a modeling job, and he's like, "Hey, come have sushi. I'll make you some free sushi or whatever." So me and my two buddies go to have sushi for the first time in Minnesota at this place called Fujiya, and we were seated at the sushi bar next to this couple that we ended up like talking with. That couple left and paid our tab on their way out. And I ended up working for that guy because he was one of the most connected entrepreneurs in Minneapolis. And his field was oral appliance technology. So like mouth guards. And the company was called Bite Tech, like biting down. And so the reason I decided to work for him, even though I was just a freaking artist with no college education, is because like he saw that I was producing these fashion shows. So he invited me to help him produce an event. And then he saw how hardworking I was, and I became kind of his right-hand guy. But so many of the people that were investors in his company were celebrity entertainers and athletes and business people. So I knew if I really did a good job for him, it would open up doors for me.
Right.
So when I came to LA in 2007, one of the investors in his company was a guy named Joe Blake, who's one of the top commercial casting directors in our business, who's also best friends with the big director and show producer Peter Berg, behind like Friday Night Lights and all that stuff. And so when I got here, I met with Joe. Joe said, "You want to run sessions for me?" I said, "What's that?" And 2 weeks later, I was working in casting full time. And now if you can work with somebody like Joe, who is, known to have a pretty tough personality, then you can work with anybody in Los Angeles. So as soon as people learn that, oh, Shaan can deal with Joe, well, shoot, like then he can deal with me. So I started working all over town with some of the toughest personalities in casting. And, as long as you're professional and efficient and like, good at communicating what needs to be done, the world's your oyster when it comes to running sessions. So I became one of the top session directors, working 4, 5, 6 days a week, running casting sessions all over town. And my gosh, did I learn so much from doing all of that. But also what came with that was such a respect. Like when people see that you're working in casting, they treat you very nicely. And so I've had such a pleasant experience in LA because almost immediately I got a job working in casting where people tend to be nice to you. And so, and the work was flexible with auditioning, and it paid well enough for me to be like, okay, and live a good quality of life. And so, gosh, it was a blessing. It was so great. And then I stopped working in casting when I got involved in union leadership, just because I no longer wanted to work in a casting capacity when I'm supposed to be representing the best interests of performers. So that kind of ended for me around 2017, 18.
And you have a book about everything that you've learned and sharing, right?
Yeah, commercial, commercial acting in LA, a session director's guide. That came from me being invited to teach these kind of commercial audition technique classes, and I just didn't want to forget to say anything.
Right.
And so I wrote it all down, and then I circulated it to my friends in casting, and they looked at it and they were like, well, maybe you should include this, maybe you should include that. So it turned into this book. And then that book was written in a very different voice than most of my other writings. It was written with a real sense of humor and kind of like an irreverent, kind of adult language type of thing. But that's because it was boring and brutal to write a book. But like I needed it to be like fun and entertaining. And even if I'm the only one who laughed, at least I made myself laugh while I was writing it. But at least I got her done, and I created an audiobook version of it, and it's out there for people to consume if they want it. But it was kind of everything that I had learned at that point over the 7 years I've been working in casting. And I just put that out there for people to experience. And that led to Backstage doing a review of it, and then they invited me to write for them, which I did for years. And then if I hadn't been writing for Backstage, I never would have written this article, Stand Up for Your Union, which is what got the attention of the union leaders that invited me in to volunteer. So it's like all these things that like you don't know when you do this, it's going to lead to this and this and this and this. But like I wouldn't be involved in union service if it wasn't for me writing that stupid book. Like, it's just like so random, you know?
Yeah. So working with the union, with casting, and as a performer and writer and everything else, you've really had this like unique vantage point of looking at the entertainment industry. So what are some of the changes that you would like to see happen, and especially in this time when representation and supporting the arts and just this idea of like protecting artists is continuously coming up? What are some of the suggestions that you would have if you could like change anything about the
Oh
industry?
Lord, there are so many, and it just depends what you're referring to, because there are so many changes that I want to see on the side of our employers. There are so many changes I want to see happen within our union. There are so many changes I want to see amongst our community of performers. That's something that's stuff that we need to do. So like, it just depends, you know? So, you know, why don't you choose one of those three? Like, you mean us as performers, SAG-AFTRA as the union, or our employers? Where would you like me to start?
Let's start with us as performers for $400. Thank you.
I think the most important thing that we need to change is our community is so out of its power. And that's so devastating to see, because if at any point in history it was more clear how valuable what it is we do is, it would be now. I mean, during the pandemic, when we were all locked up, everybody was watching movies and TV shows to comfort themselves through that experience. And so it is absolutely upside down land that we aren't in more power than we are at this moment, but we are absolutely out of our power. And how do you get your power back? Well, you have to know your worth, and you have to engage in advocacy for your profession. And you can do it on your own, or you can do it through things like SAG-AFTRA, where it's an organization entirely set up to advocate for our interests. But the thing is, the union can only fight for the interests of the people who show up to participate. So if you don't actually get involved, you're not going to change anything, you know? So many of our community, so many performers are just sitting back and taking the status quo. You know, they're taking the issues that come along with self-taping, even though it's incredibly destructive and disrespectful in so many ways. They're taking the loss of like residuals and other kinds of compensation that we were, you know, entitled to. They're taking the pay disparity between the celebrities who make millions of dollars per episode while everybody else is getting the bare minimum. They're taking the exploitation by the big employers and streaming services, you know. So if they're just going to take it, and part of it is, then it's kind of like, let me finish the sentence. If we're just going to take it, then it's what we deserve. But if we want something different, we actually have to work for it. The problem is most of us weren't educated about how we actually advocate for ourselves. Which one of your high school drama teachers told you how this stuff works? Your college drama professor probably doesn't know how this stuff works. Unless you're an actively working professional, even most actively working professionals don't know how the union works. Like, it's just the blind leading the blind. But it starts with us recognizing how much value what we do has. And even you, as somebody whose career is just getting started, like, you have to know how valuable what you do is and how valuable you as an individual are. And anybody who doubts that, let's just see you book a series 6 months from now, and then you'll know exactly how valuable what you do is. But we have this perverse idea that unless we're successful, we don't have value, and we don't have a right to speak up for our value. And that's so wrong, because we know there's a certain degree of, you know, good fortune that's accountable for why some people are where they're at and some people are not. It's not a fair system, you know? And so that's why just about every successful actor that I know says they would never look down on another performer for not being where they're at, because they recognize they were fortunate. They happened to be at the right place at the right time with the right training, and, you know, that could be why they're where they're at. And so we have to humble ourselves and recognize how valuable every single one of us is. And so, so anyway, I think if there's one thing I would change, and one thing I'm actively working to change, it would be to help our community rediscover its power.
Absolutely. And what about for the union and the employers?
Well, so for the union has existed for about 90 years. And the impression that I was under was that, oh, it's the union of all the professional actors in TV and film. It must be like a really well-oiled machine, that everything is working properly, and there's plenty of participation from the membership, and we've got all the best and right staff people that are doing all that. Like, if you don't know, right? You just assume. We just, any other company that exists, we're like, yeah, Target Corporation must be just operating fine. Like, you don't know the dysfunction within Target or Costco or whatever, right? Yeah. So why would I even think that SAG-AFTRA could have some dysfunction within it? But like, of course, our union has a lot of dysfunction in it, and for very good reasons. It's like there's been a bunch of really traumatic events that took place over especially a very short period of time that affected our union, including failed merger attempts, strikes, and technology changes, and all this stuff, and merger of two different unions. When SAG and AFTRA merged together, that was a messy process. And so the union is very dysfunctional, and it's getting better because there have been many like myself that have been working for a long time to start moving the needle in a better direction. But you can't expect those that got us in that situation to get us out of it. We need fresh eyes and new leaders and younger people to get involved and participate. So yeah, the biggest thing that I would change with our union is to change the leadership community into one that is willing to work for what's best for the entire membership, not people working for their own power or self-aggrandizement or partisan interests or political interests. It's like, either we're all in this together as a union, or the organization is just not going to work correctly. It's going to be divide and conquer. We're easy pickings for the employers to play us off against each other, or to co-opt our negotiations or whatever. So the union is getting better, but it's been very dysfunctional, and I've been a very vocal critic of the way things need to change. So that's what I would change with the union, because as soon as you've got good leadership that's in it for the right reasons, things can start being fixed left and right very easily. You just need the right people in positions of leadership, and then you can change all of these other issues that I could talk forever about. Right. And then when it comes to the employers, the biggest thing that I would change from the employers is to recognize how destructive it is to their own products, the way that they're treating performers. Like, we've got these massive companies investing billions and billions of dollars in content, and yet the way they're running their ships and the way they're running their shows is burning out cast and crew, putting us in danger of our safety and our health. It's like not compensating us appropriately for what it is that we're contributing to their businesses. So people have a hard time even just existing as performers. Self-taping has had a massively destructive impact on our community, because people are under the impression, the false impression, that there's greater opportunity. What they don't know is that they're seeing 10 times the amount of tapes as who they used to see, right, watching the first 5 or 10 seconds and moving on. And so it's like, you might as well not even have taken the time to send in a tape if they're not even going to do the respect of watching it. And right, so people are burning out with their mental health, with their emotional health. They're exhausting their friends and family reading for them for their auditions. It's like, it's taking a real toll on our community. People are auditioning more and booking less, and it's freaking everybody out. And people are now asked to be their own DPs and makeup and hairstylists and directors and editors and all this, just to send in a freaking audition tape, when before you would go and it would be their problem to do all of that stuff. You just had to go in and act. And so I think that the employers have really, they really just are, either they're aware of it or they're not aware how destructive the way their business model is operating is to the very, it's like they're poisoning the ground that their entire business grows out of. And so, they're going to face a significant pushback from the community, because there's only so much we can take. And I know people that have left the business left and right because of how things have changed. We didn't get into this to act in front of our cameras in our homes without anybody around. We got into this to collaborate and tell stories and be with other people. And so yeah, the employers are going about this content creation process in a very destructive manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the biggest parts that just feels lacking. I mean, of course, the pandemic took its toll, but just like the lack of community and the lack of people is the reason. I mean, the community and the people are why I got into this industry. So the lack of it is definitely.
Listen, the industry started with people who owned studios, who were human beings who you could talk to and be like, hey man, like, You know, now our industry is owned by tech companies and companies like Amazon, you know, for example, that can take a loss on what they create artistically because they're just trying to get people to buy their toilet paper on Amazon.com. They're not entertainers first.
Right.
They're a marketplace, and they realize they can use our art form to draw eyeballs to their commerce platform. And so they don't care, they don't care about the art of it. Like, ultimately it's in service to their other business aspirations. And in one way you could say that every single Amazon original show is a commercial for Amazon.com because it's purely created just to draw you to their commerce platform. So that's a very different type of employer. It's not somebody who gives a crap about the artistry. It's they're using the artistry that we do to advance their other non-artist interests. And that's a very different type of employer to deal with, which means we have to be even more aggressive and more effective to counteract this highly optimized machine, that's using our art form. And so it's the responsibility of every performer to engage in that. Otherwise, you can't complain that you're being devalued. And I don't blame our performer community because people aren't educated about the union. They're not onboarded into the union well. They're not given orientations that tell them exactly how to utilize the union for our success. So people feel just lost and helpless.
And if you could give some specific advice to an aspiring performer or someone who's just entering the field, especially those who are South Asian, what would that be?
That you can do it. And that we don't know when your success is going to happen. It could happen a week from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You don't know. But, one thought experiment that I like to, ask of people is like, we'll just use you, for example. Like, if somebody could come down if God himself came down and said, Ishika, in 20 years, you're going to book this role that's going to make you so fulfilled as an artist, and that is going to take care of all of your financial concerns, and that will cement your place in the cultural legacy of, this industry, but you've got to work as hard as you can over these next 20 years. And you're not going to have that same success until that 20-year mark. Would you be willing to work over the next 20 years knowing that that is coming in your future?
Yeah. I mean, no one becomes a CEO overnight. So
that's right. But you can see how difficult it is because we don't get that guarantee. No God or angel comes down and says, hey, it's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years or 20. We don't know. And there's a small part of our brain that's like, it could never happen. And so, like, I had a parent of a student of mine ask me, but because they were like, well, shouldn't she have a plan B and go to college and stuff? I'm like, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't go to college. So you're already talking to somebody who's got that bias. But I will tell you that they're like, well, out of everybody who pursues this, how many of them actually succeed? I'm like, but they're not all operating with the same work ethic and with the same information. So that question isn't like, what percentage of people that do everything right and know everything, know the right information, what percentage of them succeed? Almost all of them.
Right.
Like there's actually a blueprint to follow, but most people don't know what that is. And so they struggle for years. And so I think the important thing is that the information is out there. You can do this. And so you just have to be willing to work hard and be the best artist that you can be and build relationships and know it's a long game. It's not a short game. This is a long game. The cool thing about our industry is while you're continuing to build your career over many, many years, at any point, the universe can just leapfrog you up a few rungs, right? Where it's like, congratulations, you're on a series. Congratulations, you're in a big movie. But even if you just build incrementally, you're going to get there. But you have to have the patience to do that. Otherwise, you're not really in it for the art. Like, I'm an artist, whether I am going to, whatever my career is going to be, it's going to be. But I'm an artist and I always have been. So it'll be what it'll be. But, other people who are like, oh, I'm going to give it a shot. I'll try it for a couple of years or whatever. It's like, that's no strategy for this because, I mean, studies have even shown that if you have a plan B, you're going to be less successful at plan A. Just devoting extra time and energy and even like diluting your passion, saying like even operating in a space that's like, oh, I might not be able to do this or this might not work out for me. It's like, if you've got a plan B, go do the plan B, man. Like, it's hard enough for those of us who are in plan A to like have the work ethic and the devotion and all that. Like, go do your plan B. Congratulations. Right. Have that life of security. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I would say. My main advice is, know that you can do this. And as for the South Asian aspect of it, like I said, it's a more inclusive community than it ever has been. And so, all I would be saying is the same stuff that we've been talking about for the last few years as we become more inclusive. Like, you don't have to let anybody else label you. You don't have to change who you are. You can be proud of your heritage. You can know that you can play anything. You're not going to be relegated to what I was relegated, which is terrorists and Quickie Mart owners and cab drivers and stuff like that. It's like, you could be anything today. And so like the world is your oyster. It's your time to shine. Like, go and do your thing and don't worry. In fact, I'm not judging anybody who does this, but I'll just share. There's an actor out there who, when I met him, his name is Pritesh, Pritesh, right? But he had started calling himself Pritish because it was easier for like people to pronounce than it was to say Pritesh. And so, when he introduced himself to me, I'm like, Pritish, isn't it Pritesh? Like, well, I just figured it's easier. I'm like, well, for what it's worth, I think you should just be proud of what your name is and like you should stick with it. Like, let people be inclusive of you as opposed to you diminishing your own name, trying to appeal to them. I mean, I'm one to talk. My parents named me Shaan. It's not like it was that hard of a journey for Shaan, So you could be like, screw you, Shaan, you've got an easy name. But like, Pritesh is a beautiful name, And so, but for whatever reason, it resonated with him, and he goes by Pritesh, and I think that's great. So I just think like part of me is like, don't diminish the beauty of our culture and who you are and what you're named, because people actually want to embrace that. There's a more inclusive culture than ever. And so whenever I see someone like saying the anglicized version of their name, I'm like, why do that? Like, celebrate the beauty of your name.
Oh, absolutely. Same. Whenever I hear that, I just kind of think that like our name is like the lasting impact of our culture is held within that one word. And so much of what our family and our parents, their experience is in that one word. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
And I think one other thing that it makes me think of is like, if you believe in karma, really act like you believe it.
Yeah.
What goes around does come around. It's so easy for us to be like cynical about it. And sometimes you invest in a relationship and it doesn't work out. But, like investors, like angel investors in startups, for example, they know that only 1 out of the 10 that they invest in is going to succeed. Right. But hopefully it'll succeed enough to make the investment in the other 9 worthwhile. Right. So like, I think that it would be awesome to see people in general just support each other, embrace each other, be kind to each other, take care of each other, because we really are each other's greatest resource. And you could be the person that makes the difference for someone else at a time of need that will sustain them. And then they have a, like I remember there was a story about Nicole Kidman, and she was close with Naomi Watts, and Naomi was thinking of quitting acting or something like that. And Nicole like talked her off the ledge. And then like the next whatever month, year, whatever, is when Naomi booked Mulholland Drive, and it completely changed her from into a movie star and whatever. It's like, if you can, there's also other studies that's like, if you can sustain someone longer, you're just giving them more opportunity for something good to happen, right? Like if you only stay in the game for 2 years and don't win, maybe you could have won if you stayed in for 3 years, and that would have been what. So part of it is like this war of attrition. How do we sustain each other to stick with it?
Right.
So take care of each other, be good to each other. It's not a dog eat dog industry in my view at all.
And also acknowledging that success means something very different to everyone.
Right. I mean, I define success as just making a living with what you do. That to me is a very reasonable success, a reasonable definition of success. But sure, if other people have other definitions, whatever it is to you. But I think we can all agree that if somebody in this day and age can support themselves as an artist and that's it, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this show is called A QISSAA with Ishika, and QISSAA means episode. So is there any one influential episode that really impacted your life as an artist?
Like an episode of life or an episode of like of a
Yeah,
show
like,
that I.
no, an episode of like a story from your life.
Oh God. I've had so many wonderful mentors and people that have, guided me along my way. I guess at the risk of sounding cheeseball, I think I'll say that this current episode of my life is the most incredible, humbling thing I've ever been a part of, and I think will ever be a part of.
Mhm.
And that is being part of the show that I'm on. So, I was raised in a Hindu household. I don't identify as a Christian, but I'm on a show that is about the story of Jesus through the eyes of who knew him,
Mhm.
and I play a pretty, key role in that story as Shmuel, this character that is, believes that Jesus is a false prophet and is trying to protect the people from this guy who claims to be the son of God and thinks he's dangerous and whatever. And this show has been an absolute miracle. It was the first 4 episodes we shot after getting something like 5-6 million in crowdfunding from investors, and then we raised 10 million over it from 19,000 investors for season 1.
Oh,
And then season 2, we were able to raise the entire budget of like 20 some odd million from voluntary contributions from people just paying because they love the show. Same thing for season 3, which we're shooting right now. And like people in 200 countries, it's been translated into 50 languages. It's been seen 410 million times, whatever it is. It's like this little show is going to be the most watched TV show of all time, I'm convinced, because there's 2 billion people on the planet who identify as Christians,
right,
and there's 5 billion others that are like, what are these 2 billion up to? So there's just a lot of interest in this story and this culture, and the show is so well done, and it's really humbling to be a part of something that means so much to so many people. Like some of us have these dreams, to be a part of something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or The West Wing or Game of Thrones or whatever. And it's like, but ultimately we want to be a part of stories that touch people's lives. Well, how many lives does a story of Jesus touch? Quite a few, right? It's just a lot of those projects in the past have been kind of B-movie quality. They haven't been made as really high quality narrative entertainment. So our show might be that. It seems like it might be that. And so I'm just so inspired by that. And our entire cast is brown people. Like there's like such a handful of people who are like Romans or whatever. But it's people from all over that are like Indian, Middle Eastern, Israeli. Like it's so cool, like this entire show has been so careful to cast with authenticity in mind. And so how cool that what I think will be one of the most watched shows of all time is going to be a bunch of Indians and Middle Easterns and like whatever, like pretty freaking cool, right? And so yeah, it's a very inspiring period of my life, because we've got 4 or 5 more years to go, and I'm part of this show for the long haul. And so let's see where this takes us.
And where can people watch this?
I mean, if you just Google The Chosen, you can't miss it, and it's on like 40 different platforms. It's on, an app on you can go to the App Store and like download The Chosen app and watch it on the app, or SmartCast it to any TV or something. Like it's everywhere. What's really fun too is that they've got the normal marketing campaign to spread awareness about the show. And then they've got this Gen Z specific campaign where they did a documentary about where they brought like 9 Gen Z people together to binge watch the first season of the show, and they were not told what show they were going to be watching. They were just brought together to say, hey, we're going to show you this show, tell us what you think. And then they just let these people watch the show and then captured their reactions, and it was such a moving, stirring experience. And like the fact that people responded to the show even though they had no idea, and some of them had a very complicated relationship with Christianity or faith or whatever. And then the third way is this really like fun kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, but like counter campaign where they've got this whole like, they hired this comedian to play the devil, and he's trying to convince people not to watch the show. So they launched this whole thing like thechosenisnotgood.com and like don't watch The Chosen and whatever. So it's basically like, the devil trying to convince people not to watch. It's so smart. It's so fun. They've been using social media so effectively, whatever. So this whole Chosen experience to me is like the inspiration right now for me. And it's already changed my life, and we've only just begun.
Well, I'm glad that you chose The Chosen to talk about. Yeah, and do you have any other upcoming projects that you're developing yourself?
Oh God, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that's in the works, but yeah, I mean, I'm not hard to find. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you're absolutely welcome to. My contact information is all over the internet. You can clearly look me up by my name, and I'm always happy to take time and answer people's questions and guide people. So for anybody who's listening or watching, do not hesitate to reach out if you think I could be helpful. Just know that I make that offer to thousands of performers, and sometimes it takes a while to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm not hard to reach.
Yeah. Well, thank you for number one, joining me on this show. Thank you for the investments that you're making into this industry, and just for the advice that you've offered me and everyone that is listening today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have been here. Thanks for the invitation. And yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out if I can be helpful in any way.
Of course. And thank you so much to everyone who watched today's episode. We have some upcoming episodes coming out. The details and specific dates for those will be publicized in the next few days. So stay tuned for that announcement. And thank you so much again for tuning in. Make sure to like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to my channel. And have a lovely rest of your night.